Episode number 160 of the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. I'm Michelle, a fertility acupuncturist here to provide you with resources on how to create a wholesome approach to your fertility journey. My guest today is Rebecca Wilson. Rebecca facilitates Shamanic Womb Healing and Rites Blessings. She is the founder of Womb Connection, Healing, Awakening, which has been birthed from her own personal story of womb awakening. Rebecca is a womb keeper, womb healer, wise woman, spirit baby, and birth doula. She holds a powerful earth-filled medicine which naturally infuses all of her work and offerings. She is deeply connected to nature and finds her inspiration within the elements. Rebecca is a channel for the sacred energies of Divine Mother frequency, connecting heaven and earth through the new earth templates and earthline grids. She holds a healing transmission for the birth of a new earth. Her passion is to lovingly hold a space for participants to express themselves fully and creatively. By allowing them to feel comfortable and safe when dipping their toes in vulnerability, Rebecca encourages self-expression through embodiment healing, which provides a space for each individual to explore and awaken deep energies throughout the physical, emotional, and spiritual body. Rebecca encourages each individual to take their own journey through her offerings, creating a space to tune into their own intuition and inner wisdom. Welcome to the podcast, Rebecca.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so beautiful to share this time together.
So I found you on Instagram. We were just having a really wonderful pre-talk because your Instagram is fabulous. You guys got to check her out. What is the handle again? I don't have the handle right on me.
It's at Rebecca_Wilson_.
Yeah, it's incredible. It is so good, and you can really feel your energy and your spirit shine through it. So I would love for you to share what you're about, your background, and how you got to what you do today.
Yeah. Well, as with all of these, questions, or it's such a journey to unravel and unfold. But I currently work with women, supporting them on their journeys with their womb and feminine energy. And that often looks like supporting women to connect to their womb space, their feminine energy, their fertility, or the challenges that may arrive on that journey for them. So working with them on conception, also working to clear and release traumas and emotions and experiences in life that have been held, carried in the womb space, to then move into creation really is the essence of my work, conscious creation. And whether that's the conception of a life, or it's a conception of a vision or a dream or a wish or work, our purpose, that is the energetics that I'm really working with. This whole journey of conceiving, gestating, and birthing through the womb space as the portal of all creation. So yeah, that's where I am. That's how I'm serving and how I'm journeying with so many women at this time. How I arrived there, well, of course, so many spirals. My journey really began with a disconnect from my own menstrual cycles, being on the pill for a very long time, which seems to be, a very common story that I hear so often. Just disconnect from my own being, my energy, my emotions, my natural cycles, the fertile cycle, the creation cycle. So my journey really began there, reconnecting to my inner cyclical nature. And then it just unfolded, and I began to awaken all these different parts of myself, honoring different parts of the cycle of creation. In our fertile cycle, we have these inner seasons, and we have time to create, and have time to let go, and have time to rest, and have time to plant seeds. And through a very beautiful, spiraling, unwinding journey, I've worked on releasing lots of different energies, emotions, stories, beliefs, habits that I've been holding in my body, my heart, my womb. And that then really opened up what I would say like my womb and my body as this like vessel of creation. So yeah, that's kind of the beginning point. There was so many things in between. That would be a whole podcast.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure. And it's interesting because I have another podcast called Conceiving Your Divine Purpose. And I think that you would totally be a great guest for that. I didn't think about it because I was thinking, this podcast. But yeah, I'm so with you because we look at creativity and we look at fertility as only one way, but it's so many different ways. We can conceive lives and movements, and there's so many other ways to conceive, but it also, conception lives on so many vast dimensions. So it's a physical dimension, the most dense dimension, and then it can be on a spiritual dimension and a mental dimension. So there's many different ways to see that. Another thing that I can totally relate to is having menstrual cycle imbalances and also going to the doctor and being put on the pill for many years. It's kind of like a very common thing, and I think everybody's been through this. And what I find interesting is that as humans, our makeup and our tendencies is to need, especially when you're young and you're growing up and you're learning about your body, is to really need validation from another person outside of you, like a doctor or somebody who has credentials, and you go to them with that expectation or that need. And then as we get older, if we really go inside, we realize that that's not where our truth lies. That's not where our power lies. And it really means to go within to get a lot of the answers.
Yeah. And really honoring that cyclical nature, I find, and on the journey that I work with so many women on conception and fertility, there's such a strong emphasis on the fertile part of the cycle, but that doesn't exist without the rest of the seasons.
Absolutely.
Or the rest of the parts of the cycle. So, for myself, starting with the disconnect from my cycle, like most women know of their cycle at the point that they bleed, because there's a physical manifestation of it there.
Right.
And working with women on the journey of conception and fertility, there's this strong energy of like grief and sadness when the blood comes, and only being like I'm fertile now. This is the window now. And I would really work on like honoring all the different parts of the cycle as a whole. Like without the other parts, fertility doesn't exist, because we also need to sow the seeds and sow the land and turn the soil and nourish and water and grow. And if the crop, if we will, doesn't come to full spring, to full bloom, there's a letting go and a decomposing and a rest before the cycle starts again. So we really come into this whole awareness of fertility as all parts of the inner cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've come to really love my period when I do get it, the bleed, because it feels like such a moment. It's a window. It really gives you really feel that energetic opportunity of cleansing, and you feel an opportunity to emotionally cleanse, because we've all been there where we had like so much tension built up in our body and we're not able to release. And it's not that we don't want to release, it just doesn't feel, how the window opens in certain parts, and then you feel that it's easier to release in certain times. And that's what it does. It allows us that release where we have like this full purge and cry and release of everything. And we feel so much lighter after that if we honor that, because it's an opportunity. It doesn't mean that we take it.
Exactly. Yeah. There's this opportunity to descend as the blood will flow down and out, and to come into rest and into stillness and into that inner experience of winter. That's that season of that part of the cycle. And also to honor that the ending is the beginning.
Yeah.
Like day one of the cycle is the first day of the blood.
Right.
So the end is the beginning and the beginning is the end. Like they can't exist without each other. So it's just the perspective or the lens in which we see that or experience that through. And, celebrating the blood as an opportunity, as a manifestation that fertility is still there. Like the womb is still wants to grow and shed and release. And also honoring that time of deep rest and deep nurture. It's not always available because life can be busy and full. I often notice within myself when I have not nourished in my bleed and in my winter, the rest of the cycle just doesn't have the same rhythm or flow.
Absolutely. I'm with you 100% on that. It's so true. It really is like all parts. And we focus on one part, we're not focusing on the whole. And every part depends upon each other. It really needs that whole to thrive in order for all the parts to thrive. And you had talked about feminine energy. And I really believe that a lot of us women in general, like, have tried to keep up with men at work. I mean, this is a collective I'm talking about, not specifically with me, although I did have that early on in my career, my different career. But it's an energetic as a collective that we're all experiencing. It's this go, go, go of modern time where we shut off our feminine energy, our place of receptivity, that yin, because there's the yin and yang. Yang is very active, but it'll burn out. It'll burn out the yin if it's too active. So it's important to have that yin where we recede, we go back, or we allow in. And I really do think that going into that energy, especially for women, is very supportive of their reproductive health.
Yeah, it's essential. I remember writing a piece actually around like fight, flight, and fertility. So the fight, flight response in the nervous system, and fertility, and them just being like no match. There's like a big like disconnect and discord. That those two energies don't blend well. So the burnout, the kind of like bottom of the pan, the bleakness, the emptiness, the exhaustion, like nothing grows there. We only have to ever look at nature to see and understand the fertile cycle. Nothing grows in a burnt down forest. It's blackened, it's burnt out.
Yeah. And that's
and
not
if it
to
does,
say,
it takes time.
that anybody's experiencing. I'm just saying this because I know exactly what you're saying. I know exactly what you're saying. And there's absolute truth in it. At the same time, I know that people feel guilty, and there's no shame, there's no guilt, there's none of that, because it's all about learning and realizing, that you almost have to look at certain truths, and it might bring up some feelings, but it's important to really look at nature. Just like you said, just look at nature and really understand where things thrive the most.
Yeah. And also looking at nature and seeing how resilient it is and how quick it can arrive back into fullness if it takes rest. So honoring that rest in the smaller cycles means that we don't have to go into a big long cycle of years and years and years of exhaustion before we come into rest. We just can honor it cycle by cycle, whether that's on average every month for hits, give or take some days for women. So just honoring that 1 or 2 days of deep rest allows the soil, the ground to become fruitful and alive again. Don't wait to get to that like depletion before needing to take the rest to restore. The body will always restore itself. We're so resilient, and
it's amazing.
There's so much magic and wisdom in these bodies that we have. Like nourish and take good care of the inner world.
Yeah, and it's such a good point that you bring up, that it is resilient. It's not like this isn't like a life sentence. Just because you feel burnt out now and just because your body's depleted now doesn't mean it's like that forever. Actually, the body's designed. It wants to thrive. It will let you know in many different ways that it wants to thrive, what it needs, what it doesn't need, what's not good for it, what's good for it. And getting quiet, getting receptive is how you really align with that. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I've reached burnout a few times in my life, many years ago, and I'm now in a really like thriving full energy. So it's absolutely possible to restore and rebalance. And that's the journey that, you know, and I'm sure many facilitators kind of like, let's not push it to the edge before, you know, let's like learn practices to support along the way. And also what you can bring in like moments of throughout the day, just to kind of rebalance when things might just feel a little bit like fast and out of in a spin.
Yeah.
Just coming back into the body and taking some deep breaths and grounding and just slowing everything for a minute. And then just moving from that place, you know, there can be just real micro moments.
Totally. That's such a good point.
Yeah.
I think people think it has to be this big thing, but it doesn't. It could be just little sips of space throughout the day.
Yeah. Yeah. And I often find that is such an interesting exploration because when it's felt like it needs to be like all this big thing or best not, it's still that energy at play. It's still coming from the same energetic of all or nothing. Yes. The extremities.
It's coming from a yang energetic. You're giving more yang to even the yin that you want to bring in.
Exactly. It's so fascinating. You know, I've done that for many, many years. Like, I need to do my practice for like this many hours and I need to rest. And it's like, well, how about just like spacing it sporadically throughout the day and just having like 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, 5 minutes here, 20 minutes before bed, and allowing it to be more stable.
I think that's genius. I think it's such a great, because it really comes down to strategy.
Yeah. But the structure allows the flow. Like the structure, the strategy allows the energy to thrive, to come back into that full kind of like bubbling sparkliness.
And so how, if you don't mind mentioning your story, because I do really believe in the power of stories, how was your menstrual cycle and how were you able to really shift it?
Yeah, so when I came off contraception, I didn't actually have a bleed for like 18 months, but I was basically like premenstrual for 18 months. So it was no fun for me or anyone.
Yeah, we need that progesterone. I think that's a big thing.
Yeah. So I was just eating chocolate and, you know, premenstrual mood for around 18 months. And then when I did get my bleed back, it was just, it came out really for me very physically in my physical body. So a lot of acne, depression, mood disorder, extreme exhaustion. My body was so tired. My cycles, once they came back, which it took a long time for them to arrive back, were seemingly quite regular and not too heavy or anything, a heavy flow. Just like the cycle itself and the bleed all seemed in a rhythm, but it was coming out in all these other ways in my body and my energy levels and feeling depleted and just not feeling full of life, just feeling, you know, sleeping for a full night's sleep and waking up exhausted, never feeling rested. And I've gone from that to like, you know, now honoring that part of like, well, when the rest is needed, rest. And then when I come into spring, there's this real tenderness and like seeds of possibilities start to come in, and I just gradually work up with the energy as it builds. And then summer is like this full bloom ovulation. I'm really creative. I'm also quite social at that time of my cycle, or, you know, I like to play out and have a bit of fun. And then autumn comes, which usually is spoken about like, a letting go and a releasing. But I find the autumn of my cycle to be incredibly creative. I start to come more into my cave. So I've kind of passed that. I want to play out in the world of ovulation. And I come more into like the inner world of creativity and creation. And then as I come into the bleed part, it's like time to bed in, time to rest again, which can also be a really creative time And it can kind of pull me in a way, because it will be like, oh my God, there's all these energies, all these ideas. Okay, it doesn't matter, you're bleeding. Go, do. You feel so full of life. And I'm like, I have all of this, but if I don't honor that descent, spring will be so challenging. So just like give yourself a day, give yourself 2 days, write all little notes of the things that come, but they don't need to be actions. Just like let them be there. It's okay for them to rest in my field of awareness, or to be there as possibilities. Allow the full descent and the full release to happen, and then reevaluate. Did those ideas that came really now still in flow or not? And it's really interesting to kind of, in the springtime, work with what does come in the autumn and the winter, and replant them and start again.
That's such a smart idea, because sometimes we do get so overwhelmed. We get all these ideas. I get the same way. And just write them down, because I think the anxiety is that they're going to disappear. So put them somewhere down. They're not going to go anywhere. And then you can revisit it when you have the energy for it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And if it does disappear and we can't find it again, like, okay,
it's okay.
It was part of the release. Maybe it was an idea that needed to be released and not brought in. Right. It requires a trust. I feel like a trusting in the whole creative and fertile cycle.
Yeah, totally. And one of the things that I noticed, so I was working in New York City in corporate world, architecture, and I also had very wacky periods, like really wacky. Like same thing with acne, PMS all the time, because I wasn't ovulating and I wasn't getting progesterone, which is a very calming hormone, by the way, and it helps sleep. So, those kind of things can really increase PMS. And I wouldn't get my period for 3 months at a time. I was just all over the place. And there was no flow in my life. Zero. And when I went to an acupuncturist, this is what really inspired me to do what I do today. I went to an acupuncturist and he completely regulated me with herbs and acupuncture, as opposed to the pill that I was given for like over 10 years. And had I not gone to him, I know my fertility would have been completely shot. And not only did I start having my period monthly, regularly, but I also had a much better flow in my life. So it's kind of an interesting thing. We call it flow, but it brings us flow when it's imbalanced.
Yeah. There's no mistake. I love playing with words in that way. It's like, or these old sayings that come, or like the flow, or the energy, or the descent, or the creation, all these words that come in, and they really actually mean something on a greater,
there's no accidents. I think there's like metaphors everywhere.
I hear you. I'm with you on that one.
Yeah, totally. And what do you work with the moon as well?
Although I don't bleed with the moon in any specific way. Sometimes because of the way that the moon is and the cycle, and sometimes I'll work with the moon, but I tend to stay in my own inner rhythm. I'm aware of the moon cycle. It was something that I was very attuned to many years ago and kind of worked with that. But the more and more my own inner rhythm and my own nature has grown stronger, I'm aware of the external cycles in not only the moon, but everything and everyone else. But I am anchored in my own inner rhythm.
That's amazing. Listen, Zara Haji had talked about something which I thought was really fascinating. She talks about not just the cycling either with the full moon or the new moon, but also the waning and the waxing moon. And she talked about the different parts of our life and how some women just are, they end up in the middle. And it's definitely fascinating. I always thought the moon was so interesting, and it's never always exactly like I fluctuate and switch, but I was just always fascinated about how we're such a part of that rhythm.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely moves me and alters me, the moon cycle, and I can definitely feel aware of the new moon and that real inwards time, and the full moon and that real illumination. more so now in my dream time. So yeah, new moon I'll feel more tired, and full moon I have very wild dreams.
Yeah,
So,
it's interesting. It definitely has an impact for sure.
yeah, it cannot be questioned in my reality. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because my husband works at the emergency room, and he actually does see an impact in certain psyches of people
Yeah.
when it's the full moon. He like knows it's the full moon before he even looks, just based on what he sees now. It's crazy. And he's a very
Yeah.
scientific person. He's not, which it is kind of scientific. We just don't know about it. We haven't like really
Mm.
made it a thing. But he's not like I am, more
Yeah.
spiritual. So it's
Yeah.
interesting to hear from him.
Yeah. And my partner's the same, but like with the dreams. So he'll
Hmm.
be like have like 2 or 3 nights of crazy dreams and be like, is it a full moon? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, you're having the
That's
crazy
so
dreams
funny.
too. Like we're sharing dreams, what's going on? But yeah,
That's wild.
yeah. And yeah, he's more in that logical like brain, but absolutely, and it affects him and he can feel it. So it's like it's a real thing. It is science. It just hasn't necessarily been
Exactly.
explored
Discovered.
yet. Hmm.
Totally.
Yeah.
And so how do you work with women? I've gotten a lot from what we were talking about, but how do you work with women
Mm,
to help them really connect with their menstrual cycle, like the full cycle and the different parts and seasons?
yeah. um First of all, the first step is actually just coming into connection to the body, because a lot of the time there's a disconnect from the body, and really being in the body and not out of the body. And then we go even deeper and just finding the connection to the womb
Hmm.
itself as a space, as a container, and remembering that space. A lot of women don't, it's not like, oh, reconnect to the womb, because actually some women never had the connection there
Hmm.
from the beginning of their lifetime. So there's just been like, oh, I didn't even know. Like, yes, of course, I know I have a womb, but I didn't know that I could connect to this space, that there's these energies and I'm feeling this way and that way. And then we would explore learning about the inner rhythms. And I always like to give like a really broad frame, and then just explore more about like what does it mean to them, because it's
Hmm.
so different for every woman that I've worked with.
Yeah.
Everyone, like we all ovulate on different times of our cycle. We all have different length cycles. We all feel different in different parts of our cycle. And for a long time I worked on quite a strong frame or structure around it. And then the more and more I'd work with women, and then my own cycle in comparison to my friends and clients, and I thought, oh, this is an opportunity for us to like not feel like we need to fit in another box.
Yeah,
Like, oh,
totally.
but this book says that every week is a different part of the cycle. And it's like, well, some people, some women's cycles are shorter or
Yeah.
longer, or all of the different things. So I hold that gently and come more into like, well, what's alive for them and how do they feel at different points in the cycle, and what is their desired outcome of connecting to their cycle? Is it to ease pain, discomfort? Is it for conception? Is it to awaken their fertility? Is it conception because they want to conceive, soon? Or is it, I'm thinking about becoming a mother in like years to come, but I realize I want to support my health now? And depending where they are, we'll work in different ways, and also depending what's present for them. Women that have experienced womb trauma, grief, baby loss, maybe they're on a long journey of IVF or fertility support. Maybe they've experienced trauma in their feminine line or with,
Hmm.
relationship with their mother. And all these things just
Yeah.
accumulate and get held in this holding space. So we begin to unravel and unpick and unweave all of the identities, beliefs, energies, emotions, just to free up that space so that she can hear more
Hmm.
clearly that inner voice, the voice of the womb, if we will, or just that wisdom that lives in there.
Absolutely. Even in Chinese medicine, they look at the different parts of our bodies as having spirits of their own or
Mm.
energies. It's more an energetic frequency and emotions. And I think that a lot of people, because it seems so abstract for a lot of people, people just look at the physical and they just look at labs, and it's easier to sort of understand because that's the reality we all agree on.
Mm.
But if you really do give it a chance of asking your body and really connecting with your body, you'd be amazed at what can happen, the transformation.
Oh yeah, yeah. And just seemingly, I've worked with so many women on the path of conception, and there's like no known medical reason. They just haven't been conceiving, haven't been falling pregnant, and will unravel something around like a story or a subconscious belief that they've carried from being very small. Um, Maybe somebody in the family says, like, oh, it's really hard for women in our family to get pregnant. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just programmed
Yeah,
them. And they just carry
totally.
this belief like, oh, it will be so hard for me to get pregnant. And when I say like, well, where's that come from? Where is that belief? Where's it been rooted? Where's it alive? And it's like, oh, I just heard it in my family and that was how it was. And it's like, well, is it true?
Yeah.
Well, maybe not. And we begin to explore that subconscious seat and unpick and begin to weave in new energies of like, my womb is a fertile ground. My womb will hold and give birth to life. And then, we work on that.
I love it.
Mm.
And in Chinese medicine, they consider a heart uterus connection. Some people call it the second heart. It really is
Yeah.
something that is very receptive to love energy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I would work with the heart womb connection. So often, the women kind of pour out from their heart, like
Hmm.
externally, the energetic comes outwards. And so we work on just like not closing off from the giving, but also taking time to come in and down.
Hmm.
And so descending from the heart into the womb, we'll visualize pouring love or support and nourishment or light and healing through the heart into the womb space, just filling the womb with whatever it is they feel they need, that connection, that support, that grounding, nourishment, love, and allowing it to become this space of sanctuary inside
Yeah,
of ourselves. Yeah.
totally. And I think that, yeah, the sacred, it's like we don't often have time to create sacred energy in our life. So
Mm,
really nourishing that aspect. And that is so feminine. If
yeah.
that's how I perceive it. It really feels so feminine and receptive.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, with culture, there can be an emphasis on like pouring out that nurture, and
Hmm.
that is of a beautiful expression, but in equal measures of pouring it inwards as well, so that there's a balance on the whole. Um, and it allows everything to flow.
Absolutely. So if people want to work with you or want to check you
Mm.
out on your website, how can they reach you?
So you can find me on my Instagram, which is at Rebecca_Wilson_, or my website is rebecca-wilson.com.
I'll have all of these links on the episode notes so you can find them there. And Rebecca,
Mm.
thank you so much for coming on. This is an amazing conversation. I love talking about the womb. So
Yeah.
this was a great conversation. I love your take on it and how you
Mm.
really approach it. It's beautiful.
Thank you so much. It's so beautiful to share together.
So that concludes today's episode. You can find all of the links mentioned on the episode notes. If you're enjoying these episodes, please take a moment to share and leave a review. Reviews mean everything to podcasters, and I really enjoy hearing from my listeners. You can also find me on my website at www.thewholesomelotus.com or email me at info@thewholesomelotus.com. I love hearing from my listeners. If you're interested and want updates as well as a free ebook on my top 10 fertility boosting habits, you can visit my fertility page on www.thewholesomelotus.com. I thank you so much for listening in and hope that you have a beautiful day.